Taylor Swift dropped a new album. It's called Folklore, and we're going to talk about each and every single track on this album. There are a couple of big things that I wanted to point out just from the start. Number one, I think that this could potentially be one of her best albums yet. And it's for this reason. On a lot of her other albums, she was, young, and sometimes the lyrics were, they've always been really good. They've been really real, really insightful. But sometimes they're just a little bit too romanticized, a little bit too nostalgic. They would kind of rest too heavily on some of those kinds of emotions that I think are just too easy to evoke. And this one felt like it dropped all the gimmicks, and it felt like we were talking to her. There weren't any snakes or thrones or bad bloods or anything like this. It just felt very simple and real and honest. And I'm not saying that those other things were bad. I just felt like this album in particular, more than any other album yet, I felt like I was getting to know who she is. And I think that when you listen to like her first few albums, you feel like you're getting to know a 16, 17, 18-year-old girl, whatever. But with this album, it felt like we were getting to know somebody who'd had a chance to mature, somebody who maybe through this relationship that seems to be working out just fine, despite what some people are theorizing based on the lyrics of this album, someone who through that relationship has started to become more herself and to become more secure and more willing to experiment and take risks and do cool things. I think that was a big thing that I saw in this album. A couple other big picture things were, number one, notice the power of metaphors and images. She even mentions it in that big Instagram post she made. It started with imagery, visuals that popped into my mind and piqued my curiosity. Stars drawn around scars, a cardigan that still bears the scent of loss 20 years later, stuff like that, where she's taking a physical, concrete item and writing a song based around that idea. And I think that's a really powerful thing to do in songwriting, because humans are visual, not necessarily visual, but they're concrete thinkers. It's easier to think about something that reminds them of love, like a picture of two people kissing, or thinking about that old sweater that reminds them of somebody they love, than to think about the concept of love. Imagine the concept of love inside your head right now. You're probably thinking of a heart, but you're probably thinking of an image, or you're thinking of the literal words spelled out. You can't imagine something that is so abstract. So Taylor Swift in this album particularly does an incredible job of making these big concepts very real. And not only does she use that, do that using imagery, but she does a lot of it using some really strong stories. She talks about an exiled man walking the bluffs of a land that isn't his own. An embittered tormentor showing up at a funeral of his fallen object of obsession. My favorite, a misfit widow getting gleeful revenge on the town that cast her out, which we'll talk about in a little bit. There's some really, really good stuff in here. Like I said, we're going to go song by song. I do have my notes here. And this album caught me while I was on vacation. Thus, the background that is not my own. Don't worry, where we're at, we're following all state rules and laws, wearing masks, isolating for the most part. Everything that we need to be doing based on the rules of where we're at, and more besides. But when Taylor Swift dropped an album, of course, how could we not talk about it? A couple other things to note before we get into the song by song. And this is going to be a little bit more of a professor video. I'm going to have lecture notes here. I'm going to be talking to you. And this should definitely be a conversation, so I'm going to read what you guys have to say. Please comment and give your thoughts on this. If you think I'm wrong about something, let me know. But it is going to be very note-based because there's just so much to say. And it's also going to be one take so that I don't have to edit this because, like I said, I'm on vacation. The other big thing, Taylor Swift is swearing a lot. There's 5 songs marked explicit here. I think there was one song where she swore on Reputation, and she's written other songs where there was swearing before. But this was definitely interesting, and it felt, again, more like that maturing process. Not that you have to swear to be mature, but it just felt less, I don't know, innocent and naive. The other thing was that a lot of people there's a lot of clickbait posts anyway saying, people are thinking that Taylor Swift broke up with Joe based on the lyrics of this album. And you know me, I don't like celebrity gossip, but you can't talk about a Taylor Swift album without getting into celeb gossip a little bit. So I'm just going to go ahead and call out those magazines because I don't really think that anybody who's actually read the lyrics or listened to the lyrics of this album think that they've broken up. There are several songs in here that make it abundantly clear that that's not the case. And if you would just read this Instagram post from her, you would see that she's talking about stories from other people's perspectives. She says, I found myself not only writing my own stories, but also writing about or from the perspectives of people I've never met, people I've known, or those I wish I hadn't. So seeing clickbait titles like that, I think probably sends some people the wrong direction. And maybe when you read those articles, maybe they say something a little bit more realistic and grounded in reality. But for the most part, it has nothing to do with reality, because I think that they're still going strong. As we'll see later with some of these. That's it for the intro. I will say that this video is sponsored by my other channel, College Hacked, and I'd really like you to hear me out if you are in early college, like freshman, sophomore year, or if you're in high school or late middle school. Because something that I care about super deeply is the fact that a lot of you guys are setting yourselves up for huge amounts of student debt. And I hear so many people, and I know the people who I'm talking to right now, you guys are Gen Z, right? You're coming after the millennials. And millennials are great. I'm one of them. I love them. But they made some mistakes, and some of those mistakes were paying too much for college and then complaining about student debt afterwards. And I get that in many cases, there's just not another option. But for many people, honestly, there were. I graduated college at age 18 for under $7,500 using credit by exam and alternative approaches to higher ed because I just wasn't super happy with the status quo. My College Hack channel, which I'll have a video up here at the end and is also linked in the description, talks about how you can save just tens of thousands of dollars and tons of time on college. Because let's face it, the world says, hey, to get certain jobs, you need a bachelor's degree. Even though when you get to those jobs, you realize, I did not need a bachelor's degree. I needed 2 weeks of on-the-job training and I would have been just fine. And for a lot of positions, obviously not doctors or lawyers, that is often the case. So we need to be rethinking college, because college and the student debt system and loans and the expensiveness of it isn't really out there to help you. It's kind of out there to profit off of you in most cases. So don't just go along the system with like everybody else. Go check out my videos. I'll show you how to save money on college, get a really solid bachelor's degree, and then be able to go get the job or career that you want. It's cool. The videos are free. Check it out. Link in the description, like I said. All right, sponsorship done. Back to business. Let's talk Taylor Swift. The first song is her song, The One. Oh, and let's talk musically real quick. I wanted to mention that the music across this, I like the music from The One. It was kind of lively, but it had the same thing that the rest of the album had, which was kind of this more like folk aspect. The song is called Folklore, and she talks about what that means in her Instagram post. A tale that becomes folklore is one that is passed down and whispered around, sometimes even sung about. The lines between fantasy and reality blur, and the boundaries between truth and fiction become almost indiscernible. Speculation over time becomes fact. Myths, ghosts, stories and fables, fairy tales and parables, gossip and legend, someone's secrets written in the sky for all to behold. And it's kind of how about like our personal stories, our personal life are all connected. It's like there's these archetypes, right, where we have similar experiences, but then those get passed along and people make rumors and the details get fuzzy, and eventually it becomes something that we all share. And Taylor Swift is kind of adding to that folklore. She's going to have some fuzzy details when she talks about her grandpa landing at Guadalcanal in 1942. She doesn't have all the details right, but she's turning it into folklore by turning history into a story in the form of a song. And I think that's pretty cool. She's basically canonizing some small stories. And if you're, interested in academics at all, it's a pretty interesting process. And it's interesting especially to see a pop singer so self-aware about that process, even if she's not on the academic side of things. So let's talk The One. The One is basically a what if, and it's a what if about what if we'd gotten together? What if it had worked out? Which is, I think, not an uncommon thing for people to wonder, especially if you'd been in a relationship with somebody, it was really serious, and then you realize, this doesn't really seem like it's going anywhere. Things happen, it falls apart, and you say, well, what would have happened? Now, keep in mind that she's writing this as someone who's dating a guy who she apparently really likes. And so you think, well, would he be threatened by that? I don't think so, because she sings, and if my wishes came true, it would have been you, talking about this other guy. But the end result that she comes to in the song is just to ask more questions. She doesn't say, oh yes, it would have been so great, it would have been nice. I wish we'd made it work. By the way, she makes it sound like it was this other guy's fault for not making it work, like maybe he passed on her. But the result she comes to is just to ask more questions, just to say, you know, what would this have been like, and to wonder. And to live in kind of that hypothetical world. She doesn't even really come to any conclusions at all. It's just basically asking a question, which I think is an interesting exercise. It's obviously one you don't want to get stuck living in a hypothetical world. And I don't think that's something that she does too much here on this album. She comes back to concrete stories, concrete images. She just starts out with this song, The One. It's about a person who at one point seemed like they were the one, which if you're not familiar with American slang is kind of, and maybe that's not just American, but it's kind of referring to the one, the person who is my soulmate, the person who's going to make me happy forever, the person who will solve all my problems. It's, you know, basically code for, you know, the girlfriend or the boyfriend that I'm super crazy about right now. Then we get to question 2, or song 2, Cardigan, which was really cool. It had a cool music video. Let me know if you guys want me to talk about that music video, because there's definitely some strong imagery. She hops into a piano bench, for goodness sakes, almost drowns until she catches hold of a piano, which is crazy. It's an interesting music video for sure. But the song itself, listen to these. And when I felt like I was an old cardigan, all right, I mean, there are probably worse things than being an old cardigan, but you know, cardigan's like I think it's like a sweatshirt that buttons up in the front, right? So I felt like it was an old cardigan, a ratty old cardigan, under someone's bed, she says. You put me on and said I was your favorite, which is kind of talking about how, you know, we have like an old hat or an old shirt or something that we really, really like. And she might be saying, I feel like I'm no good. I feel old and dirty and I'm just stuffed under somebody's bed and forgotten. And this person's like, no, I found you. Thank goodness. You're my favorite, actually. And that's kind of a cool revelation. I think based on what this song, I think what she said about this song was that it's about young love. And I think she was talking about why young love relationships are so memorable. And based on the song, it sounded like she was saying that those relationships are memorable because you're in high school and you feel like trash sometimes, right? You feel like nobody likes me, I'm unpopular, I haven't figured out my life kind of sucks maybe. But then you might have a relationship with someone who says, sure, you're a cardigan, but you're my favorite cardigan. I like you despite, you know, whatever we have going on as we try to figure out being teenagers, which, let's be honest, being a teenager is not the best part of your life. It's going to get way better, guys. Trust me. Yeah, so I thought that was pretty cool. You might feel like a punk, but you're someone's favorite old sweater. Isn't that nice? I thought that was a good song. The Last Great American Dynasty was really interesting. Really, honestly, the first 8 songs off this album were incredible. She's talking about Rebecca Harkness, who her second marriage, she was like a person from, actually, I didn't do the research enough on that. I don't remember how far back this goes, but it was, I think, in the mid 1900s or early 1900s. Anyway, she married an oil tycoon who died. And so all of a sudden she went from being this person who was really passionate about dance. I think she started from a middle-class family and now she's filthy rich. And so she buys like this mansion in Rhode Island, the Harkness House, I think is what it was called. And she has a bunch of parties. She starts a ballet. She is friends with Salvador Dali, who makes this super fancy goblet for her, which is now the urn for her ashes, which is crazy. And Taylor Swift buys that old mansion in Rhode Island and has parties in it too. And in the song, she kind of draws connections between herself and that person because she says that all the people in the town were like, there goes the maddest woman this town has ever seen. She had a marvelous time ruining everything and they don't like her. And she's saying that that's kind of what people say about her and Taylor Swift, even though Taylor Swift, based on the limited knowledge I have of the history, more made her own money, even though she did seem to have a lot of help from her parents, from some basic research I've done. She has that connection with Rebecca Harkness, saying that like people say, yeah, she's crazy and she's messing up things, which is a common theme that we see with Taylor Swift, especially in her Reputation album, where it was kind of all about how people were just pooping on her reputation. We'll come back to that song probably at some point because there were some really good lines in it. Exile is a beautiful, sad, slow song with Bon Iver, which is really cool. I think that was one of the coolest things about this album is that, first of all, she was working with Jack Antonoff, who is the guy who is the drummer for Fun, and he is behind the band Bleachers, which is one of my favorites right now. You definitely need to go check out Bleachers. Check out Jack Antonoff. He's super cool. He did a lot of writing on Lover with Taylor Swift, and he's done a lot on this one as well. Yeah, Jack Antonoff, great. I'm talking about him on a song that's supposed to be about Bon Iver. Anyway, Bon Iver, also a super cool, like, artsy guy, and Taylor Swift decided to do this song with him, which I think is really cool. It's like this duet between him and her, the only duet on the album, and it's about a relationship ending and then seeing each other happy with someone else later, and kind of just thinking about that and feeling like you're in exile from that relationship. It's sad, it's slow, it's beautiful, it's not really sweet, it's more melancholy than anything. And that song, the value and benefit in it is not so much in talking about the lyrics, it's more in listening to the song. So go do that on your own time. Song number 5, My Tears Ricochet. Swift says that the song is about an embittered tormentor showing up at the funeral of his fallen object of affection. The narrator is, and this is me now, reflecting on a relationship that was full of ups and downs and kind of ended up as a mess that the narrator is now trying to sort through. It doesn't have a resolution and ends with the line, "Look at how my tears ricochet," to prove the true sadness there. It is a beautiful, sad song, and I think it's a theme that we continue to see here, which is this melancholy, the wondering of what if in the one, talking about the end of a relationship in exile, sort of the sad sweetness of Cardigan, like, I feel like I messed up, but I'm someone's favorite sweater, woohoo. And we get to My Tears Ricochet, where, look at how my tears ricochet, the last line, is proof that, you know, I really did care about you, but there were so many questions. Was this relationship good? Was he abusive? What's going on here? And there's not really any answers. It just kind of is this, yeah, he really did care about this person, but it's over, and there's not a chance to get resolution. Which, I mean, we just see the sadness and the melancholy throughout this entire album, which I think, again, makes it a deeper and more interesting album than many of the ones that we've had previously. Then we get to Mirror Ball, which is a reference to a disco ball. And this one I found as one of the, maybe the most interesting. First of all, she's using that really strong imagery, which I think is cool. But listen to this. I want you to know I'm a mirror ball. I can change everything about me to fit in. I'll show you every version of yourself tonight. I'm still trying to keep you looking at me. This is something, I'm a big fan of the Enneagram, which is like personality types. And every time I look up my personality type to see, you know, and a couple of times I've been like, what famous people have my Enneagram type? Which I don't know if that makes me a nerd or what. But I'm a 3, and Taylor Swift is a 3 as well. And I'm a 3-wing 4. I think she's a 3-wing 4 as well. And basically what the 3 means, being a 3 or the achiever, is that you try to get other people to be impressed by you a lot. You try to show people that you're successful and try to have a really good exterior so that people are like, wow, that person's really cool. And that's one of your big driving motivators because you're afraid of failure and people not respecting you. And Taylor Swift is supposedly, according to a lot of the internet, a 3. And you can see this here in this song so perfectly. I want you to know I'm a mirror ball. I can change everything about me to fit in. I'm still trying everything to keep you looking at me. And I think the song kind of has this underlying theme that when she's around Joe, who I think the song is about, she doesn't have to pretend. She doesn't have to be a bunch of people to try, or, you know, be a bunch of faces, be a chameleon to get this person to like her. She can just be herself, which is pretty cool. If you haven't done the Enneagram yet, you should definitely go check it out. You'll probably learn a lot about yourself. But I'm not going to put a link in the description because I'll forget, so go Google it yourself. Then we have the song 7, which also happens to be track 7, which is very cool. It's talking about growing up in Pennsylvania with a friend whose dad was abusive. I think your house is haunted. Your dad is always mad and that must be why. And I think you should come live with me and we can be pirates. Then you won't have to cry or hide in the closet, which was really sad to listen to. But it was one of my favorites because it only really mentions the sad part, you know, that allusion to abuse very briefly, and then moves on to just continuing to look at things from this childlike perspective, which, well, and she's even talking about being 7, I think, just talking about growing up in Pennsylvania. Maybe she was even a little bit younger than that. But it's just a kid's perspective on it. It's very dreamlike. The imagery is really well done. She doesn't overdo anything, and it's mostly just a very subtle approach to how children see these big scary things, especially for her, a kid coming from a relatively happy family looking at a friend who did not come from such a happy family. That is a heartbreaking and powerful song. August was fun, beautiful song talking about a relationship centered in the month of August, but the relationship ended. She's wistfully thinking about trying to live in that moment, recapture the experience of that relationship. And this is something that we see often from her, the romanticization of a past relationship, similar to the first song, The One, which now that I think about it is the number one or first track on the album too. Seems intentional and cool, I guess. But I liked August. It was fun. It just wasn't that as exciting of a theme, so I don't have as much to say about it because it's something we've talked about a lot before with her. Number 9, This Is Me Trying. She sings what could possibly be an allusion to suicide. I don't want to rule on this too quickly. I'm going to leave it out there for other people to interpret. I think it's something that's going to take time. I don't want to jump in too fast, but she says, talking about this relationship that feels like it's too difficult for her to stick to, I didn't know if you'd care if I came back. I have a lot of regrets about that. Pulled the car off the road to the lookout. Usually that's like in a mountain and you see before you all the mountains. Could have followed my fears all the way down, which sounds like an allusion to jumping. It's just not something we've really heard Taylor Swift talk about before. If this is seriously an allusion to suicide, it marks a vast new subject matter piece in her music and definitely needs more attention and more focus. Essentially, the rest of the song is just her saying to somebody who we assume has said, I wish you would just try in our relationship. And she says, this is me trying. I'm just not as good at it as I'd like to be. Then we talk about the song Illicit Affairs. And I'm not sure that she knows what illicit or affairs means. Based on this song, it's really tough to tell whether it's actually about an illicit affair, because illicit basically means illegal, and an affair is a relationship that you can, I suppose you could have a secret affair, but usually affair is used when talking about having cheating on somebody, right? She sings, and that's the thing about illicit affairs and clandestine meetings and longing stares. It's born from just one single glance, but it dies and it dies and it dies a million little times. Some think it's about a secret relationship with Joe Alwyn. It could be about someone else having an actual affair, because remember in this album, she's talking from other people's perspectives, telling stories a lot. That could be what this is about, but it's not super clear. It is about a secret relationship, and she could just be using the phrase illicit affair very lightly. In any case, it was a fine song, and I would guess that it probably is from her past personal experience, but not in a actually illicit or affair type way, just in kind of like a secret relationship way, which means it could be about Joe 5 years ago or so. The song Invisible String, I really liked the sound of this one. It had this bright popping string instrument sort of vibe to it. It could have been guitar. I don't know. I don't have that great of an ear for those kinds of things. But in verse 1, she describes reading in a park as a teenager and wanting to meet some guy that way. That'd be a very Taylor Swift-esque romantic way to meet somebody. And Joe working in a frozen yogurt shop at the same time as a kid over in England. And then she asks, I'll just read it to you. And isn't it just so pretty to think all along there was some invisible string tying you to me? She talks about all these things she's gone through in her life and all the things that have happened, but all along there was just that string tying them together. They were really destined for each other, which destined to each other is not a real thing. There's no such thing as soulmates. Just gonna put that out there. But like she says, isn't it just so pretty to think all along there was some invisible string, which means that not necessarily does she believe it, but just that it's a pretty idea, right? And that eventually she would get there to him and vice versa. She mentions bad blood in the second verse and then talks about axe grinding against her old exes, but now she sends presents to their babies. And it's, again, this theme of maturing, and we move past these feuds and these broken hearts onto more adult relationships, realizing things have passed. And now we are grown and adults, and we might be able to be friends in some way, but we're not who we were anymore. So I really like that song. Mad Woman, great song, great song. Some people think that Mad Woman tells the tale of, quote, a misfit widow getting gleeful revenge in the town that cast her out. I wouldn't agree with that. I think that that's more a reference to The Last Great American Dynasty, where she talks about Rebecca Harkness kidnapping some person's dog in the town that was kind of a jerk to her and dyeing it lime green. I think that's the gleeful revenge. But Mad Woman is cool because I think it's kind of about this player gaslighting this woman and kind of making her feel crazy and on the outside and driving her crazy. Let's see. Yeah, no, I don't have any particular lines I wanted to point out, but basically it's just about this woman who's going crazier and crazier because her relationship got torn apart, people are mistreating her, and this guy now wants to date some other woman and gets her to start tackling the first Mad Woman, and kind of like Mad Woman number 1 says, oh, it's drawing you guys closer together to beat up on me, your ex. And eventually that second woman gets dumped and now she's going crazy too. And it's really talking about how this guy is turning women against each other and being, just an awful player. The next song, Epiphany, was about her grandpa landing at Guadalcanal. The lyrics, keep your helmet, keep your life, son, just a flesh wound, here's your rifle, crawling up the beaches now. And it kind of sounded like it was almost having Taylor Swift side by side with him, experiencing it with him, which was a really cool idea. Enjoyed that one very much. Then we get Betty. Oh, Betty was good. It had so much of a vibe from her earlier music, and you got it was definitely a country vibe. Even had a harmonica, for goodness sakes. But it's about this 17-year-old learning to apologize because he cheated on Betty, and now he's having to go back and ask her for forgiveness. I don't think Betty's gonna do it, folks, to be honest with you. But it is a song worth listening to. It was really good. And it's Taylor Swift singing from a male perspective, which was also pretty cool. Showing again that she's telling those stories and playing with characters. Peace is the 15th song. It is about Joe. She sings, no, I could never give you peace, but I'm a fire and I'll keep your brittle heart warm. But there was more to this song. There's so much more to this song. I really, really liked it. It was a coming of age. She says, I'm going to come back to this line in a second. Your integrity makes me seem small. You paint dreamscapes on the wall. I talk shit with my friends. It's like I'm wasting your honor. And there is a lot of like negative self-talk from Taylor here as she's kind of talking about things that are wrong with her, but she's talking about how great Joe is and making him seem just like this really awesome guy, and talking about how he brings her peace and she brings him excitement and energy, but they're a really good fit for each other, and it's again a really good song. Finally, Hoax, and I'll just be very brief. A relationship falls apart, she feels manipulated and like she let someone in and can't win or be happy, but can't get out because she wants to believe in this hoax. And I'm hurrying because my camera only records for a certain amount of time, so I want to wrap this up really quickly here. This album was something that I was not expecting from Taylor Swift in the slightest. It was so heartfelt to an extent. Like I kind of saw that coming with Lover, but this was just so much more even. It felt more real. And not that I feel like I know Taylor Swift, but I feel like I know who she is as a mature adult, like a greater version of herself, even better than I or anyone else. Well, better than I ever have. I don't know why I almost said that. Imagery was gorgeous, lyric writing was beautiful. The music was sometimes a little bit monotone, like we were kind of hearing the same kind of music again and again and again, but there were enough variations and the songs were so good and the style itself that she chose was so good, didn't really bother me. And then finally, this is a big thing I've been saying over and over again. This sounded mature. It was somebody who sounded like they had security and happiness. And here's the line from Peace I was referring to. All these people think love's for show, but I would die for you in secret. This is somebody who, supposedly an Enneagram 3, who feels like they have to perform and make people like them, which she talks about in Mirrorball, but she's found somebody who is essentially kind of like the tightening string throughout this whole album. Somebody who gives her a sense of security and peace, and now with that sense of security, she's experimenting, she's trying new things, she's writing from new character perspectives, which is something she's done before, but she's really going whole ham on it. She's not building up to this album, she's just releasing this album for people to listen to, not announcing it, nothing. Like it's really, really good. And of course now the secret of their love is out, so now she is telling people about it and writing albums and all of this stuff. But I'm really glad to see it, and it makes me so happy for her. It makes me really happy to hear this album. I know tons of other people are gonna like it, and that is my review. Guys, don't forget that if you want to save a ton of money on college, or you know someone who needs to save a ton of money on college, check out College Hacked. It is right here. They're short videos that will tell you so much information about how to save money on college. I'm not even kidding. It breaks my heart to think about all those people going into debt and having to suffer through all of that. And I really, really want to help you. So check that out. Thank you, Taylor Swift. Fantastic job as always. And I'll talk to you guys next time.